Okay, this passage is called The Cog by Charles E. Fritch, and good readers preview the text. So we look at the pictures there that we have. There they are again. There's another one. All right, and then you want to look at some of the questions here. So you kind of want to know what you're reading about. It says James Maxwell often wondered what would have happened if he had, it looks like, chosen a different career path there. So it talks about he stared at the shiny metal spaceship, and then talks about the director of space exploration walking across the platform. And we define out who Maxwell is. All right, and then we look at it's talking about things that happened in the story. The crew, the president came on the stand. Maxwell came to the microphone. The speaker told the crowd of the glorious conquest of space. We see some main characters. Um, when was it set? It's talking about a rocket had broken apart, bursting into a million fragments. The word fragments means he thought he would probably die in bed, an old man too feeble to make it to the next room. Many spectators had come to see the launching of the spaceship. What are spectators? And Maxwell went to law school because his family was very practical and suggested he do the sensible thing. What does sensible mean? And then the last page is talking about the story suggests that if Maxwell could live his life over, what would he do? What statement is true? Maxwell respected Gerald Adams because Gerald. So why? And then during the ceremonies, Maxwell must have been inside the rocket, on the lawn, or on the speaker's platform. All right, so you kind of look at the questions so you have a better idea of what you're going to be reading about, and so you can also know what it is you're looking for. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and read the passage here. All right, the cog. The huge crowd arrived early in the day and had been waiting for hours. On the enormous green lawn, families sat packed together, eating sandwiches and sipping soft drinks. Their voices buzzed with excitement like thousands of bees. High above, the sun glinted off the shiny metal of the spaceship, President. The craft towered in the sky like a silver needle, casting a long, dark shadow on the people below. James Maxwell sat and listened to the hum of the voices. Maxwell knew what had brought so many people here. Some were curious, a few were scientists, others wished to be present at this important event. But many spectators, especially the younger ones, were here simply because they felt the urge, the powerful longing to travel in space far beyond the stars. Longing? Maxwell wondered if anyone had ever felt that longing as deeply as he had. But at the same time, he knew that they had. People had always felt the call of the stars. In his heart, he was sure that they always would. Maxwell felt a touch of regret as he wondered how many of the youngsters here would succeed in their wish to reach the stars, and how many more would fail as he had failed. They would take the sensible, respectable jobs in the community. They would become cogs in the machinery of society. And yet, society needed cogs to make the wheels of its machinery run. Everyone couldn't be an astronaut, of course. The world needed doctors and teachers and even government officials. Everyone was a cog, from the president down to the lowest paid worker. Even the astronauts were cogs, all cogs in the machine. Yes, even the astronauts were cogs, he thought to himself. And then suddenly he wasn't so sure. He stared into the bright afternoon sky and wondered, as he often did. He asked himself the same old question: what would have happened if he had followed Gerald Adams' path 20 years ago? He and Gerald had shared the longing, the call of the stars. Gerald, too, had stared out into the cool blackness of the night, but Gerald had seen and found his future there. Gerald Adams had been the first astronaut to land on Venus. Later, he had died in space, touching down on Mars. His rocket had broken apart, bursting into a million fragments. Still, Gerald had achieved his dream. To die in space was his destiny, and he would not have changed it for anything. James Maxwell wondered how he would die. In bed, probably, an old man too feeble to make it to the next room, much less to the stars. Sometimes he felt that fate had played a cruel joke on him. But there it was, and what could he do? The answer was the same as always, nothing. Maybe next year, he told Gerald. James Maxwell had gone to law school. His family was so practical, so very practical. Do the sensible thing, they'd said. Then, when his chance had passed by, he felt cheated. He wanted to blame others, but nobody else was really to blame. Now he waited quietly, staring up at the sky. He had no excuses to offer. A speaker appeared, and the crowd suddenly hushed. The voices boomed out over the loudspeaker. It swept over the huge crowd, while the great spaceship sparkled and shone in the late afternoon sun. The man spoke of the glorious conquest of space, of the women and men who had led the way, of the women and men who would journey today among the stars. James Maxwell let his gaze wander upward. He stared at the shining metal spaceship. In less than an hour, the crowd would be asked to move back. Then they'd watch with pounding hearts as the powerful rocket roared into the sky. James Maxwell could feel his own heart beating faster. Very soon, he knew, the rocket would be knifing through space, speeding toward the light of Alpha Centauri. If only he were aboard that rocket. The feeling was still there. If only he could leave the life he had now. If only he could trade it for that crew member. If only. He nearly laughed aloud. It was too late, years too late. Others would be aboard the president, younger people, people who had been trained to do their job, trained to be cogs that helped run the machine. James Maxwell was a cog too. He had studied law. He had also been trained. The machine had found a place for him. It's that simple, he thought. The crowd suddenly cheered again as the crew of the president came onto the speaker stand. The astronauts shifted nervously, smiling, proud of the part they would play. These pleased but humble voyagers in the vastness of space. James Maxwell looked carefully at each face. He could read his thoughts there. How he wished he could go with them. He felt a sudden stab of jealousy. But he was not bitter. This was the way it was, the way it had to be. A great cheer went up as Mercedes Diaz, the director of space exploration, rose and walked across the platform. She carried a pair of scissors to cut the bright red ribbon in the front of the spaceship. As she did, the crowd shouted and clapped and roared and cheered. The glad sounds echoed again and again in the warm afternoon air. James Maxwell felt a part of the enthusiasm. His blood rushed through his body. His heart pounded with excitement. These people, many of them, wanted to go, but they would go in spirit only, represented by those aboard. And they were satisfied. Suddenly, James Maxwell realized that he too was satisfied. He would be represented even more than the others. In a way, it would be as though he himself were soaring through the depths of space. A voice came booming over the loudspeaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the World Republic. The voice echoed from the spaceship and rolled over the crowd. As a new cheer filled the air, James Maxwell cleared his throat and stepped to the microphone.